Thank you everybody for joining us. Jeremy and I were so delighted to have you here and share Sitecore Symposium highlights. So before we start talking about all these Sitecore new features, new products and so on, I would suggest us to take a step back and see where we are coming from. So most of us were coming from traditional CMS vision. We all have legacy technology stack. We all have aging development approach, maybe sometimes old deployment, and also on-premise hosting. Is it true? Yes. 99% is true. And this is how Sitecore landscape in general looked about 6 months ago. So technically what we can see here, just only one single SaaS product, Content Hub, and everything else, it was followed our traditional CMS vision, which is Sitecore XP, XDB, Sitecore XM, and Sitecore Commerce as well. During this time, obviously 6 months is quite a long time. Luckily, Sitecore was not standing still and invested lots of time, done lots of research, and finally starting following Tom's presentation, contributing and moving towards composable DXP, and started adding new services, new cloud services. We've all heard about coming Sitecore Customer Data Platform, CDP. It's there, Sitecore Send, and other services. So now, what we currently have, and you can see lots of different platforms, and specifically, Sitecore's landscape now consists of 3 main pillars. So we can see content, experience, and commerce. And they're all nicely now laid down together. And key point here, even 6 months ago, all these products, they've been originally born standalone. And now it's magically, we can see them connected together and fitting for purpose on specific functional element on this composable architecture stack. So now I would like to introduce you into key cloud services so we can discuss benefits for all of us, Sitecore clients, customers, and also developers who are just trying to integrate Sitecore and configure for specific client needs. Let's start our journey. Content. Content is the main pillar, and it's always been Sitecore's strongest part in terms of content management. And Sitecore XM now took focus mainly to headless. Even in Horizon editing now, you can easily update content through that editing interface. Also, it delivers with experienced edged. If you remember Tom's diagram, it's been mentioned. It's just sitting right after our presentation flow. More intuitive content editing, and also it's possible now because sometimes we would like to filter by authored or renderings or content elements. Content Hub, a new version is coming out, 4.1, and specifically there is a new feature called referenced content. So what it means technically? So content elements, content items, and Content Hub, they're becoming building blocks. So it will reduce time for producing new content. Basically, you just need to create one element, and later on, you can easily reference it in multiple different content items. Just quite a big benefit. Media delivery service through CDN improves performance and accelerates requests to assets. Preview enhancements, just general preview of content. As you're editing, you can preview your final page in Content Hub. DAM improvements. DAM stands for Digital Asset Management. So again, there are some improvements for search, for metadata. Also, it's easier now to apply different access rights because some assets, they can be behind login, sharing function, and preview for specific file types. Next pillar is commerce. Now it's called Sitecore Order Cloud, but originally it's coming from 451. It's a SaaS product with API first focus, and also it's headless. And unlike previous Sitecore Commerce product, because it was only limited to B2C, it offers B2B function and different marketplaces from multiple vendors. Now they can be managed and sourced from the same technically service of Sitecore, which is a key winner here. Extensible properties to support custom domain entities, because what happens if it's a SaaS service? Sometimes there is a requirement from our customers that we will need to extend data structure, introduce custom fields, and we think, well, with SaaS product, it might be impossible, but Sitecore Cloud supports this requirement through extensible properties now. It's all doable. Finally, end-to-end integrations with any systems. So we're not saying that we are only limited to Sitecore Cloud. We can plug other systems, specifically PIM, if there is a requirement. Sitecore Discover. It's coming originally from most recent Sitecore acquisition called Reflection. Thank you, Jeremy. I asked him to remind me. So you can see why it's coming here, because once we have our product management, product interface, we would like to apply all clever personalization. So we can improve shopping experience, we can also improve search, we can introduce more tracking, and also we can start producing reports and see performance. So specifically commerce KPIs, they can be seen in real time. So how our shop is performing. Next pillar, experience, Sitecore CDP. So what it does, so on the website, we can start tracking customer activity in real time. We can start applying personalization. Once we've captured enough data, we can start creating customer segments, and also we can share them with other external systems if there is a requirement. At the same time, security is given by design, data privacy is given, and now there is support for cookieless, and also there is non-PI mode, which is good. If we would like to track only anonymous customers' visits, it's all there. There is also a data lake and ability to extract customer data into external systems. Again, it's important. If later on we would like maybe to combine offline activity and produce bespoke business reports outside of Sitecore CDP, it's possible. So it's given out of the box here. Next element, Sitecore Personalize. Again, it's part of BoxSeva. So CDP originally is BoxSeva, and new personalization engine, it's coming from the same family. It brings personal personalization and marketing activities at scale. So technically, it's another level for Sitecore to run these features at scale at high available requirement. A/B testing, it's standard feature. Decisioning interface with new AI. So technically, it will show us next best experience of the customers if we can't predict it ourselves. And it's all powered by AI here. Goal tracking, analytics, and dashboards, they're just given. And also, it will be safe to start running new features on the website in a safe manner. So it gives more control for these operations. So BoxSeva, Sitecore CDP, and Sitecore Personalize, 2 products now. Sitecore Search, it's coming from Reflection as well. It will provide, so specifically it's for client-facing search, improve real-time search results. So as user types any keyword, it will apply personalization based on specific user activity. It will help us boost results if required. Also, it provides lighting for Search API, which is good. and it also can index content dynamically from Sitecore XM and from Sitecore Content Hub. Again, it's a key point. There is no need to take care of this specific indexation. Sitecore Send, it's originally was called MooSend. Now it provides very simple interface to create marketing email campaigns. Also, pardon?
Can't see
Yeah. Yes, create marketing email campaigns, also use benefits of Sitecore forms, landing pages, connect them together, calculate click-throughs, create recommendations. Again, it will be easier to create customer segments based on their activity, connected with CDP. And reports and custom dashboards, again, they're just given there. So they will be specifically around marketing email campaigns. Key highlight from Sitecore Symposium, now we have vision to a future roadmap. So now we're around here, post-symposium, and new Sitecore 10.2 release is coming out in November. In a year time, we're expecting next major release, 10.3. Obviously, it will be more enhancements for Sitecore XMXP and existing cloud services. But one marketing element I would like to pay your attention now, it's called Journey Builder. So technically, we will be given infinite canvas, and we can start building up user experience from start to end in a visual interface. Now I would like Jeremy to highlight new features of Sitecore 10.2. So Jeremy, it's over to you now.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, so for me, a fairly fundamental part of that roadmap is that we're getting a new version of Sitecore 10 in November. And despite Symposium and to some extent this event's focus on all the fancy future technology, I think there's a lot going on in this upgrade. And I'll start off with a few things that I think are focused on the marketing part of the product. We've got a collection of changes here to try and help with marketer productivity. Things like giving you better reporting options, easier to customize reports, and things like the ability to measure the effect that particular content variants have had on conversions when you're doing personalization and testing, for example. In the background, there's some improvements to performance for the XConnect framework, and there's more fine-grained control of deletion of old customer data. So interactions that you've recorded can now be deleted based on date or channel or other attributes they have. And that hopefully gives you more ability to manage the kind of the volume of data that you're dealing with there. If you happen to be running EXM and you're dealing with big email sends as part of your campaign work, it's now easier to scale out the kind of dedicated email sending servers using their container-based deployment approaches. And, you know, unsurprisingly, in the background, there's the usual slew of bug fixes and small performance enhancements. But for me, as an employee at UNRVLD, my focus is not really the marketing side. I spend my time with developers and infrastructure people and architects. And no matter how clever all the technology is, fundamentally, it's not really any use to you if you can't build stuff on top of it and deploy it out to make a public site. So next set of things I'm going to cover is what 10.2 and the wider Symposium conversation has in store for developers. Historically, Sitecore's been a bit of a blank slate when you start from a fresh machine. It doesn't provide content or structure or presentation out of the box. So for some projects, their SXA, Accelerator product, has been that tool that you need to get faster time to market to start with. And this release is bringing a collection of editorial enhancements to that particularly around how it works with their next generation editing user interface, Horizon. There are some improvements hiding in here for how developers go about building custom components for SXA, where the out-of-the-box things don't meet your business requirements. And there's some new functionality around how you can share content and data between sites when you're deploying a multi-site instance. Something we're likely to see in the future, but isn't quite here yet, is a concept around site templates, where your editors have the ability to pick entire kind of page or section look and feel from a kind of gallery of pre-built things. And we're going to have tooling there for developers to build these things to suit your projects. And there's talk also about a kind of marketplace for resharing these things if you think they have value or use outside of your particular projects. The developers are also getting quite a lot of change for the headless toolset in this release. And crucially, the headless tooling that has been referred to as JSS or JavaScript services in the past is also getting editing support from Horizon in this release. That's going to be really key to a lot of the future technical things that we're going to be talking about here, because it's a very important step towards what Sitecore are describing as front-end as a service, a fully featured, what you see is what you get editing environment that allows you to construct the UI for your headless sites or your things that are built using Jamstack technologies. This update is also bringing the ability for you to publish the kind of the markup and output from old style MVC user interface components out to your headless publishing infrastructure. And I think that's going to be really critical when we start talking about migration paths for your existing projects if they're not already using headless. Because there's going to be a lot of people who don't want to start a new project from scratch in order to get these features. And there's the usual set of kind of incremental updates for headless services, support for new versions of kind of important developer frameworks like Next.js and Vue and so on. There's some improvement in standardizing of APIs internally to help developers be more productive, and just the kind of usual incremental change that we see with these things. And as I've kind of alluded to, a lot of that technology and change is focused towards the idea of how we're going to build these future SaaS websites and their user interfaces. And there are a few kind of small but pleasing quality of life improvements for developers as well. There's improved tooling as part of this release. Historically, there have been a collection of developer jobs that we've kind of had to do fairly manually or with third-party tooling. And those are slowly being pulled into a kind of nice extensible command line tool to help developers. This release is adding better support for serializing and deserializing content that developers own. And it's giving the ability to control rebuild of search indexes through this interface, as well as some really important packaging technology that's to do with the future of upgrades. And all of that initially kind of helps your developers to work a bit faster, but it's also all usable as part of your deployment processes and your release pipelines. Historically, things like publish the schema changes that developers have for your content structure has required third-party tooling or you to write a bit of code, and that's now moving to be a kind of out-of-the-box feature. There's also been a pile of work to do with documentation. There's incremental improvement to go with the changes to APIs and the new features that are coming out. But interestingly, there is also a new developer portal site that launched last week, as a kind of homepage to help developers find their way to answers to technical questions, to the documentation, and to the kind of community aspects of the Sitecore development, which we think are fairly important things for people working on this product. So once you've got a site built, you're going to need to host it. Last year at Symposium, Sitecore were making a fairly big pitch around the idea that their long-term plan involves supporting 3 differing models for hosting. There's one where you organize everything. There's one where you kind of outsource a chunk of that work to Sitecore through their managed services platform. And then there's our future vision of software as a service, where all that kind of infrastructure work is magic that just happens when you click buttons. And this is still part of Sitecore's kind of big themes for this year's symposium, giving you the flexibility and the choice to pick deployment patterns that fit your projects and your business. I'll kind of come back to the stuff about SaaS in a bit when I talk about the more future-facing things. But the first model I mentioned there is this kind of you sort the hosting situation. As an organization, Sitecore have been moving to a containers-first approach to deployment. You can still deploy onto bare servers if you want to, but most of the focus and investment is to do with their working containers right now. They are also working on removing a chunk of dependency in the product for the kind of Microsoft Azure specific features that they used to use, because they want you to be more able to deploy your site to any system that can run your containers, so kind of becoming cloud agnostic. So with this release, Azure Search goes away, because obviously you can't run that on AWS or other clouds. There's also some general work in the background to adopt newer versions of some of the Microsoft frameworks, like .NET Core, and to make some of the kind of Sitecore server roles more efficient. We're also getting container images as part of this that will be built on Windows Server 2022, so you get to take when we've needed to upgrade. There's been quite a lot of work, and a key part of that has been updating schemas and content in your databases as part of that deployment. And that kind of goes away with the new container releases. In theory, for the future, upgrading your site becomes more about compiling your code against the latest version of Sitecore, building your containers, and publishing them. And there's no need for that database update. And really importantly, from my perspective, this practically gets rid of those horrible 90-page long, step-by-step, here's all the config entries you need to change documents that we used to have in the past. The second hosting pillar that I mentioned is managed services. And this didn't get much in the way of fancy announcements, but it is worth discussing. This is very container first as well going forward, in order to speed up provisioning and deployment. But a really fundamental thing here is that Sitecore is saying if you can go to containers and managed cloud and the kind of XM flavor of the product and headless, you're going to have a really simple stepping off point to their SaaS product line in the future. They see this headless managed cloud as kind of the first step in this process. There is still hosting for XP in managed cloud if your project needs it, however. It's not going away. And another kind of interesting side point that came out of this is that they are launching a collaboration with Microsoft for hosting aimed at the HIPAA healthcare regulations in the US for data privacy rules. So we may see more, less argument about I can't put my data in the cloud in the future, possibly. So, having covered a lightning tour through where we are now, I'm going to finish off with some of the details about the future products. A phrase that a number of presenters have used over the last week is the no-compromise CMS. They want to take the best bits out of traditional content management and the best bits out of headless and push them together as a SaaS product. Historically, we've kind of had a bit of a divide between traditional CMS and headless, where the traditional stuff could be heavy on the infrastructure and involved buying kind of big monolithic license. But headless, whilst it was faster and more agile, needed a bit more technical effort because your marketing team can't compose the user interface because that needs a developer. So, stealing a slide from Sitecore's Dave O'Flanagan, this is kind of the core model they're talking about for this future CMS. Using the new experience management in the cloud thing that I will talk about a bit more in a sec, and the authoring interfaces all alongside Content Hub and Experience Edge and Personalize. You're deploying these sites with the power of Jamstack, so you don't have to worry about infrastructure scaling because there's CDN magic here. And your SaaS CMS never really needs to scale because it never gets seen by internet users. Kate mentioned a lot of other products in this space. They're not on this diagram, but they do all connect. But there are various boxes here that I know I haven't really talked about before, so I'll go through a couple of things. The first thing is this Experience Manager Cloud. The future CMS needs a content source. Content Hub is SaaS, but it doesn't really cope with presentation. So this takes the XM product and wraps it up as SaaS. You can manage instances in a portal, and you can push stuff with kind of what they describe as GitOps, just through source control when you change your back end. And it hides Solar cores and databases and things, so you don't need to care about them. And it leans on that simplified upgrade story, so that sort of thing becomes much more transparent to you. And this is where you're heading with that managed services and headless and containers thing that I mentioned before. The second thing that was a lot of talk of is Symphony, and this is the next generation headless content management interface. Front-end as a service was the phrase that they used. It talks to the XM APIs, it talks to the personalization APIs, and brings all that together to make it easy for content people to build up the UI of their Jamstack site. So it's a modern take on the old experience editor, but running on future technology. And I've kind of skipped over a few deployment-related things here. And these two new technologies need somewhere to publish content. And there's two things that are important here. One of them is this Experience Edge thing that I mentioned, which is basically taking what you used to have as the headless services on your content delivery servers and pushing that up to the cloud, so you no longer need to scale that. And the other is you need somewhere to push the kind of JavaScript code of your headless site. So Sitecore are partnering with Vercel here, who are a well-known hosting product for that provides a lot of kind of technical magic to let you publish things quickly and easily and to deal with that scaling stuff for you. So, very briefly, that was a run-through of what we've seen as important from Symposium. And hopefully there's things there that are piquing your interest. We've seen a vision for Sitecore in its future SaaS world, and how we can get there, either incrementally or maybe if you've got projects to do it as a kind of big bang change. So maybe it's time for you to start thinking about your path towards SaaS and Sitecore in the future. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you so much to both of you. What an extraordinarily in-depth and insightful review of what's been happening this week. Amazing. There was a lot to take in there, so I'm assuming that people would like to know that you can watch this again on the live stream. Also, we are capturing this as video, so it's going to be on YouTube. So down the line, if there's anything... Oh, there's my builder. I'm so sorry. But yeah, if there's anything you've missed, then obviously do know that you can go back to YouTube and watch it at a later stage when you kind of need, as a client, potentially to know what's happening next.
And feel free to come and ask questions later on this afternoon if you want to. I can talk slower when I need to.
So poor Jeremy, we were speeding him up through that because we've obviously got to run to time. And we'd like to bring Charlie Bell up to join us. And also Amy Tootle, who's going to ask questions from our side as our business director. But initially, Charlie, would you like to join us up here? Thank you very much. So we're going to have a little bit of a panel debate. Do you guys want to take a chair or a stool?
I assumed we were standing, to be honest. But
You happy to stand? Yeah? Are we standing, everyone? Yeah? Good. Okay. And Amy, would you like to join us? And I know you've got some questions to ask. Thank you both, and thank you very much. Thank you.
So firstly, thank you so much for all that material you've covered. I was trying to keep up. So I guess putting my client hat on and thinking about the questions that they might now have in their minds, and from a practical standpoint. So they might have seen all the material at Symposium, they've been listening to you guys today, and they might be thinking, okay, what do I do first? Really excited by all of this. How do I get started on the journey? What would your advice be?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was that was a great distillation of Symposium, and you know, I was part of putting Symposium together, but when you're in it, you don't really get to see everything that's part of it, so thanks for that. It was really useful for me. So to answer your question, Amy, I mean, the way of getting started, and I think what we have to appreciate here is that Sitecore in the past 6 months has gone through a fundamental change in the way that we approach digital experience. And previously, as the guys pointed out, that we had a monolithic platform that really was predicated on a conversation about content. So unless you were prepared to replace your content platform, Sitecore couldn't really engage with you. And so that's changed. We can enter the conversation at any point in that DXP solution journey. We can talk to you independently about CDP. We can talk to you independently about commerce. We can talk to you about personalization as standalone products. And so we would encourage you to just engage with us and to engage with our partners like UNRVLD, because these are the people who help us bring this stuff to life. And without our partners, we're nowhere, really, because these are the people that are out there engaging with customers, talking about things like user experience, talking about things like the benefits of the platform. And we are the people who build the platforms, and together, I think the combination of the two things is more powerful than the individual parts. So to answer your question, talk to us, and talk to you, and talk to these guys.
Jeremy, Kate, anything to add to that?
pick a project and start thinking about how some of these tools might help. You know, there's a kind of undercurrent with a lot of this technology about speed. Have you got some work where you really want to get good lighthouse scores in Google? Think about how that project could become something, a thing that's built with Jamstack style technology, how that can be built to extend the website you're running already. The composability thing that Charlie mentioned, the modularity thing, means that you can just pick out little bits, find a place to start, and build from there.
So it's not a case of clients need to potentially completely start again. You know, how they might be worried about having to learn a whole new tech stack. What would your advice be on that?
Is that for me? Oh.
You seem to be staring at me there. So yeah, learning a whole new tech stack. No, and yet slightly yes. All of this is built on technology that, as Sitecore developers and users, you're kind of used to. It's all built on kind of Windows things when you're writing code, or JavaScript when you're writing code. It's built on standard infrastructure patterns. So those things aren't new. And something that's kind of important with SaaS is that actually you don't care a lot of the time what the technology stack under it is. Just connect to it, call its API. Doesn't matter if it's Python under the surface or .NET under the surface. It's just a service you talk to.
Sorry, if you
So I would say, yeah, my background's technical, and I started off as a developer in my early career, and probably now class myself as a recovering developer. But I was always of the opinion that if technology felt intimidating, then I wasn't doing my job, and the people who were building the solutions weren't necessarily doing their jobs. Technology has to be enabling and not intimidating. And there is a level of upskilling that you're required to do when you take on any new platform or acquire any new skill. Like, for example, what is CDP and how does that help me better improve my, my customer experience? How does it better improve my personalization targeting or my segmentation or any of that stuff? But we collectively have a responsibility, I think, to our clients to go out there and present it in a way that articulates it not as a technical challenge, but as a business adoption challenge, if that makes sense, and actually have a conversation that is based on the value that this is going to bring rather than this is what you have to learn. And I think all of us are ambitious enough and clever enough to be able to adopt this technology and to be able to understand what it does. And our role is to bridge that gap between the hardcore, as my boss used to call it, magic typing, which is, you know, the coding side of things, and the actual realization of that as an experience.
Yes, and the API nowadays is just an expected standard. It sits in developers' minds, so it's nothing really new for developers. It will be easier to adopt and also plug different systems under the same umbrella.
Great. And another bit of a practical question. Jeremy covered off then about the new Sitecore release that's coming later this year, next month. Where does the time go? 10.2. 10.2. Again, potentially a client question. Do they have to be on that latest release in order to access this new composable DXP suite?
No, absolutely not. No, that's the beauty of it. And Dave O'Flanagan mentioned in his keynote that you know, we would have built a whole symposium previously around 10.2. And Jeremy covered it off. There is a lot in there, and it's great for customers who are on that roadmap of adoption of Sitecore features through upgrades of the core experience platform. But as I said just a couple of minutes ago, the idea of being able to adopt a CDP or personalization, Sitecore Personalize or Sitecore Search, we can absolutely do that and retrofit that into existing platforms, and not just our own platform. We can retrofit that into other platforms, other content platforms that are out there. And so that changes the dynamic for us, and it changes the conversation in the way that we approach collectively, as with our partners, that we approach customers, because there is now not that requirement to be on the latest version of Sitecore in order to have that conversation about order cloud, personalization, the CDP. But equally, you know, if customers do want to upgrade, we spend an awful lot of time and effort making that upgrade path as painless as possible. And as we mature and go into that roadmap and execute on our own roadmap into the cloud, being on the latest version is advantageous from that point of view. So, but it's not a precondition of having a conversation, a broader conversation around some of the great SaaS composable DXP parts that we have.
Anything to add to that? I
Yes,
mean,
it
that
was
was a pretty
really for
comprehensive
us.
answer. Great. A bit of a specific question, this one. Again, thinking about clients in sectors where they might have, you know, quite detailed regulation around data security and governance.
Yeah.
And cloud services.
Yeah.
And perhaps a little bit of nervousness there, or a little bit of reservation. What might your advice be to clients in that space?
Well, the nice thing is that we've got a lot of clients in financial services. We have government clients all around the world, and security is first and foremost the thing that they are concerned about. And I think you can look at security in two different ways. You can look at the infrastructural security. So if I upload an asset into the cloud, is it going to be encrypted? And is it going to be encrypted when it's in a server or on a database? And is it going to be encrypted when it moves between that database and my client? So that's what we would call encrypted at rest and in motion. So that's the first big thing. That's the underlying, is my data safe or is my information safe? And that also applies, of course, to personal information. The next layer that you have on top of that is the data processing, which is covered by various different laws and things like GDPR, which we're all familiar with. And it's around making sure that we as a platform company have a responsibility, an inbuilt responsibility to our customers to make sure that we are having those conversations up front to fundamentally and fully understand the requirements that they have over and above what we have already built into the platform. And in my experience of doing these things with big financial institutions, we like to engage with security teams very early. In fact, we almost like it to be the first conversation that we have as part of the understanding of how our platform is going to be used in an operational sense. So again, with our partners, being mindful of that. I can't count the number of times that I've been involved in projects in my career where the project has gone along and has reached a point where it's about 2 weeks from launch and someone goes, we should probably speak to security about this. And security goes, yeah, you're not allowed to do that. And then suddenly everything goes, gets pushed out weeks and months. So we have a responsibility as a platform vendor. We have a collective responsibility with our partners and you as customers to have that conversation, understand what's needed, and build the solutions based on those requirements. But we can do it, which is, I could have just said we could do it.
Well, you filled a couple of minutes with the first answer.
Well, yeah, we can do it.
I think we've got a couple of minutes, so I'm looking at Miranda if you want to take questions from the floor.
Oh, thank you. To Naomi from Biffa. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Given the fact that we're sort of fairly well wedded to the CMS solution at the moment, and we've got kind of multiple projects in flight and all sorts of things going on, it would be really interesting to understand maybe where is the inflection point where we might need to consider kind of moving away from that model, how are you kind of proposing to work with partners to sort of make a recommendation? And I guess from our perspective, client side, it's understanding where the dependencies are. How do we need to build out the teams differently? It feels like there's a little bit more tech dependency in terms of being able to kind of write a lot of API code, whereas historically maybe that was a little bit more static. So just kind of how are you proposing to take clients on that journey and kind of potentially move them away from that slightly more, dare I use the word rigid, model to that sort of slightly more future state flexible model? I'd just be interested to get some views from the room, really.
Thank you, Naomi.
Was that for Kate or from?
I can start because luckily.
All right, okay. Go on, Kate.
Luckily, I'm familiar with BIFA business requirements, so I can start. And the good news, API is already there because we're used to integrate with BIFA internal API. So our development approach is already on this journey to composable DXP. And I believe next step will be to start looking at CDP system and start extending, because we're expecting more customers to be on the system, more engagement, more business reports, more A/B tests, more goals we're planning to set. So I believe it will be step number 2 now.
I can give you a more, maybe a holistic view in terms of the way that we're interacting with customers, and that you're right. In the old XP, get shot for that. The XP solution that we have, the old model, the old approach to doing stuff was that you built your experience in XP. You use that as a framework. You have your content that sits in XP, and you expose that via content delivery instances that the browser connects to and downloads the page payload, and everything's in there, the presentation, the content. But Sitecore has always separated content and presentation, and you've always been able to reach into the CMS and pull the content out. The shift change that's come about in the past couple of years and is accelerating is that the people are building experiences from an outside-in model, which is that API thing that you're referring to. So things like skills availability in the broader development community, things like approaches to using cloud in a much more broader way, CDNs, and using the technology that's available has kind of made that composable we talk about it as headless, but it's building that experience in an agnostic way, and then dipping into the CMS, the Order Cloud, overlaying your CDP and your personalized stuff on top of it to give that big, broader experience. So the current approach that you have is absolutely valid, and it still stands up. But there's a sort of an inevitability, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 5 years down the line, that headless experience, that composable DXP becomes the solution that is the default. And such is the nature of technology. I mean, I've been around the technology world long enough, you know, despite my youthful demeanor, I've been around a while. So the nice thing is that what you have right now is good enough for now, and looking, you know, into the immediate future as well.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for concluding on that note. And thank you very much, Jeremy, Kate, and Amy, for joining this discussion. We are going to have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to have a really exciting future viewing fireside chat between Nick Malone, COO of Sitecore, and Dan Berry, the CEO of UNRVLD. So please don't go away, and we shall see you shortly. Thank you very much.